Good morning and welcome to our Queens Borough President Hybrid Land Use Public Hearing. This hearing is taking place both in person in the Borough President's Conference Room at 120-55 Queens Boulevard in Kew Gardens and on YouTube. I am Vicki Garvey, the Land Use Director for Borough President Donovan Richards, and I will be chairing this land use public hearing on his behalf. For those who wish to testify virtually and haven't already pre-registered to do so, please visit www.queensbp.org/land-use. If you are attending our public hearing in person, please see our staff to sign up for public speaking time if you have not already done so. Please note your opportunity to speak will follow those who are pre-registered. Written testimony is welcome from those who are unable to testify in person. All written testimony must be received by 5 p.m. today and may be submitted by email to planning2@queensbp.org or by conventional mail sent to the office of the Queensborough President at 120-55 Queens Boulevard, room 226, Kew Gardens, New York, 11424. Lisa, please review how this public hearing will proceed.
Thank you. Good morning. The public hearing shall be conducted in the following manner. The applicant will be called to give a description of the zoning action requested, an explanation of the proposed project, and respond to any questions from the chair. The floor will then be open for public speakers. Please listen for your name to be called. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. A signal will be heard and notice will be displayed when 3 minutes have passed. When you are called, please identify yourself for the record and if you are formally speaking as a representative or member of a group. The calendar number or application you are speaking about, and whether you are for or against the item. Then you may begin your testimony. At the discretion of the chair, if there are a large number of speakers on any particular item, it may be put on second call. Speakers for and against that item will, speakers for and against that item may be called to testify on an alternating basis. Please note that if you are testifying virtually, you must keep your camera on during your testimony and display your name accurately on Zoom. If at any point you have technical issues, please let our planning staff know in the chat and we will assist you. Thank you for your cooperation.
You have just been advised on the proceedings of this hearing and how it will be conducted. The chair reserves the right to ask speakers for clarifications or further information regarding the applications or comments. Lisa, please call the first calendar item.
Calendar item number 1, ULURP number 230367 PCQ. The applicant is New York City Department of Transportation and the Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Affected Community Board number 2. Applicant, please begin.
Deborah, you're muted.
Yes, I'm muted. Here I am. Thank you so much. My name is Deborah Howes, and thank you very much to the Borough President's Office for allowing us to come and present today about the proposed project at 4725 34th Street, also known as the Hub in Long Island City. For this presentation, I will introduce the project site and the DOT programs that we are proposing to locate there. Then we'll provide some background information about what is motivating the need for this new space, the expansion and relocation of 4 DOT units. Then a description of the surrounding area, the project site, and the proposed project itself. And finally, we'll discuss the findings of the fair share analysis, the seeker EAS that were performed. And then we'll have a conclusion. We'll have time for your questions. This site, this is a picture of an aerial photo of the project site at 4725 34th Street. Moving forward, we'll refer to this site as the Hub, outlined there in red. DOT, in coordination with DCAS, is seeking to site select and acquire this privately owned site for a lease duration of 20 years. That long-term lease is triggering the need for the ULURP. The site is approximately 120,000 square feet. It's a 4-story building of about 322,000 gross square feet. It's located in an M14 zoning district in Long Island City's industrial business zone. And the DOT units that are proposed to be located here include sidewalk inspection and management, abbreviated as SIM. The SIM inspectors and the citywide concrete crews will be located there, and traffic operations, automated enforcement, and fiber optic electricians. Currently, the SIM citywide concrete crews are operating out of the site under a license agreement. The next slide, this slide shows some pictures from the site from a few different angles. The upper left photo is a site looking southeast from 47th Avenue and 34th Street. The upper right shows the main entrance to the parking lot on 47th Avenue. And the bottom right is a closer look of the building and loading dock. Some background explaining why DOT needs this new space at the hub. So there are 4 units that have been affected recently by important city priorities. First, the SIM, the citywide inspection concrete crews and inspection units are expanding due to a court mandate that requires the installation of pedestrian ramps and upgrading existing pedestrian ramps to current ADA standards. This affects 162,000 street corners throughout the city. And DOT is in the process of hiring 440 new staff members to implement these improvements. 111 of these employees would be assigned to the hub. These new employees cannot be located in the current SIM locations because these locations are already at capacity. 2 other DOT units have already recently been affected by city priority projects. The Traffic Operations Automated Enforcement Unit is growing to meet the needs of the city's speed camera program, which has expanded to cover an additional 730 school districts. 200 new and permanent employees will be located at the proposed development. And then the traffic operations fiber optic electricians needed to relocate from their yard at 37th Avenue due to the construction of the DEP water tunnel number 3. 16 electricians would be relocated to the proposed development in Long Island City. This shows the surrounding area, all M14 zoning, and is characterized by a mix of commercial, manufacturing, and institutional uses. The hub has been identified by DOT as a very good location for their SIM and traffic operation units for many different reasons. The site is well served by public transit, and employees would be encouraged to take public transit to the site. There's a good access to the city's highway system for the crews that will need to travel to other boroughs. The existing building and site are adequately sized for DOT and would require minimal changes. DOT's proposed uses are very compatible with this zoning. And as previously stated, the site is located in the Long Island City Industrial Business Zone, which would support the city's overall economic development goals by bringing over 300 jobs into the Long Island City IBZ. This slide shows the DOT would occupy the ground floor and mezzanine floors of the building, about 155 square feet, 55,000 square feet. And the dashed blue line shows the exterior paved area that DOT would also occupy, another 20,000 square feet. The proposed project would modify the ground and mezzanine floor space into warehouse and office space, electrical workshops, storage, and interior parking. Outside surface parking would support DOT vehicles, equipment, and materials. Please note that SIM would not be storing concrete materials or be preparing any concrete on site. an advantage of this particular site is that it requires only minimal interior improvements to meet DOT occupancy requirements, and no new construction would be required on the site. All right, to show you a little bit more of the detail about the proposed development, this slide shows you the ground floor of the building and exterior paved area on the left side. That yellow shading outlines the space for the fiber optic electricians, and the blue shading shows the space for the SIM citywide concrete. The ground floor would include workshops, office space, storage, and paving for DOT vehicles and equipment. This slide shows the mezzanine floor of the building. The red pinkish area shows the office space for automated enforcement, and the green shows the office space for the SIM inspectors. Half the mezzanine floor would be used for parking for the specialty vehicles and inspector vehicles. That's the white area. As for resiliency concerns, the hub is not located in a coastal flood zone. You'll see a little inset map on the sort of bottom right area of the larger map. That's the flood map for the area, and the site is not located in the flood hazard area. Sustainability is also very important to DOT and a priority for the city. So DOT, in partnership with DCAS, will be exploring the opportunity to incorporate energy efficiency and sustainability into any building retrofit. A fair share analysis determined whether or not there are disproportionate number of city facilities in the area that perform a similar function. And that analysis, based on that analysis, was determined that there was not a disproportionate concentration of similar city facilities in the study area. The need for the proposed project by DOT was stated in the 2020 to 2021 and also the 21 to 22 citywide statement of needs. This project underwent a city environmental quality review and an environmental assessment. Statement was created, which analyzed the project and any potential environmental impacts. It was determined that the project would not create any significant adverse impacts related to hazardous materials or contamination. The site and building would be getting minimal updates, which would not disturb the ground. Also, it was determined that the proposed development would not result in significant adverse traffic impacts to the surrounding street network. Compared to the future no action condition, where the reasonable worst case development scenario determined to be commercial office space, the proposed project would result in incremental vehicle trips only during the weekday AM peak hour, which would be 5:30 to 6:30 AM, when there'd be approximately 2 additional vehicles per minute on the aggregate of the surrounding roadways. There'd actually be 94 fewer trips during midday peak hours and 10 fewer trips during evening peak hours compared to that no action office scenario. The trips added during morning peak hours would consist of workers arriving at the site and departing in agency vehicles to the various work sites. The analysis also concluded that the project is not expected to result in any significant adverse parking impacts, considering the proximity of the site to public transportation. So in summary, DOT is seeking to site select and acquire the property at 4725 34th Street to house SIM inspectors, SIM citywide concrete crews, traffic operations, automated enforcement, and traffic operations fiber optic electricians. This project site is ideal for DOT. It's located close to public transportation, excellent vehicle access to the city's highway system, industrial and office space that's adequately sized, appropriately zoned for DOT operations, requires minimal improvements, increases economic activity for the local businesses. The fair share analysis determined no disproportionate concentration of similar city or DOT facilities in the area. And the seeker EIS determined that the project would not create significant traffic, parking, or environmental impacts. And the project has received a finding of no significant impact, the FONSI. With that, we're ready for your questions.
Thank you very much. That was a very comprehensive presentation. The only question that I'd like to ask at this time, for the record, I know that Community Board 2 won't vote on this item until tonight. But if you could state for the record, just a summary of what was brought up at the land use committee meetings about this particular application, just so we are aware of what the land use committee may have had concerns or questions about.
I can start. I can
sure.
start with the list, yeah. So, and Case, you can jump in if I'm missing anything. I mean, of course, the first concern that everyone usually has is about traffic and parking. So, parking especially. So they were concerned, would we be taking up any on-street parking site spots with DOT vehicles or personal vehicles? And our response still is that we have adequate parking inside the building for all DOT vehicles that would be stationed there. Considering that the site is 2 blocks away from the 7 train, it's most likely that, I mean, virtually all employees would most likely take the subway there. It's more difficult to drive to the site than it would be to take public transportation. And so we are not predicting any impact to parking around the site. There was a question about street trees. There was a member of the land use committee that was concerned about the lack of street trees around this building. We of course would love to plant new trees. The issue is like the landlord for this building, will be a lease building. They're not in control of the trees around on the sidewalks around the building, so they can't really just plant new trees. DOT isn't in control of trees around the building. So the best we can do at this point is look into potential partnership with parks, or looking into further who would be able to plant more trees in the sidewalks around the building, and see if that's possible. We can't guarantee that, but of course we would love to support that. Case, what am I missing?
No, that's it. I mean, just to reinforce your points, we have had discussions with the landlord that he's very pro-tree. But the issue is, I think it's a right of way. The sidewalks, it's not belonging to the property owner. But we can definitely explore that. A few corners, I think, are in need of some trees. Looking at it, after our previous meeting. And the other issue that came up, I think, was solar, and the landlord has also looked into that, but the footprint is such that it's not really an advantage at this particular site to add solar to the roof.
I think there's also a question about the pedestrian ramp program, the curb ramps that are being upgraded by DOT, and whether DDC was also involved in that project. And we looked into it, and yes, DDC is also involved in the pedestrian ramp upgrades at complicated intersections. So if it's a straightforward intersection, DOT is going in, making the upgrades themselves. However, there are more complex intersections in different parts of the city that we do need DDC's design work to come in and plan the upgrades to the full intersection. And so we do work in partnership with them. So that was a question that came up. And there was a concern that the building is in the flood zone, but we double checked and we confirmed it's not in the flood zone. So that's why we added the flood map. I'm trying to think of anything else.
There was a question about the shifts. People do come, and that's part of why it's not a mass of people all coming at the same time. They come from 5:30 to 6:30, from 6:30 to 7:30. So there's not everybody coming at the same time. They come basically by transit. They get a vehicle, they leave, and they leave for the day. And the other question was trying to understand why, with even, a couple hundred people there, it would be so much less than if you had office there. Well, A, there'd be much less people than if you had a full office there. And B, the majority of those people, that 80% of them, are gone for the entire day. So they're not running errands, they're not going to lunch. They go out to all. Majority of them are, well, maybe half of them are going to Queens, but then quite a lot of them are going throughout the city. They're gone for the day, and then they return again in shifts. So that's why you have so much less traffic with this particular land use than you would if you had an office with people coming and going all day. And office users may, in our tables, there would be more car use and more need for parking.
Understood.
That's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah, they had a lot of sustainability concerns and things like that, and as Doran has answered all of those. They mostly were, the sense was that they were quite favorable.
Yes, thank you. And these are all great points and comments from the land use committee. So, we'll be tuning in tonight as well to see how the vote goes at their board meeting tonight. Seeing as how there are no people signed up to publicly testify in person or on Zoom, we're going to go ahead and close this item. And I thank the applicants for making the time to present today. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
We will move on to the next calendar item.
Certainly. Calendar item number 2, ULURP number 240061 PPQ. The applicant is New York City Department of Sanitation and New York City Department of Citywide Administrative Services. Affected Community Board number 12. Applicant, please begin.
Someone may be muted if they could double check.
Good morning. My name is Michael Portis-Swart. I'm a city planner at the New York City Department of Sanitation, and I am presenting on this proposed disposition ULURP action for the property located at 9722 Crestkill Place, block 10011, lot 14, located in the Queens neighborhood, the Jamaica neighborhood of Queens. I'm joined by my colleagues at DSNY as well as my colleagues at the Department of Citywide Administrative Services as co-applicants. This is a map showing the location of the property. It is on Crestkill Place between 97th and 101st Avenues.
Sorry to interrupt, but we actually don't see a presentation on the
You
screen.
Don't see a presentation.
Great. Yeah. Now we
Okay.
can see it.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. This property was in use as a Department of Sanitation section station between 1930 and 2016. Section stations serve as break facilities for sanitation employees that are out in the field. These facilities provide employees with locker rooms, bathrooms, and a place for them to eat their meals. Additionally, the site was used to store archival documents. Lot 14 is approximately 25 feet wide and 100 feet in depth, with an area of approximately 2,567 square feet. The lot is located in an R5 zoning district, which allows for 3- and 4-story attached houses and small apartments. This is a zoning map showing the property location within the R5 district. This is a photo of the front of the building viewed from Crestkill Place. It was in use until 2016 when it suffered water damage resulting from a flood. Thereafter, the section station functions were relocated to the Queens 12 garage located at 130-23 150th Avenue. It has since been cleared out and secured by DSNY. Since the closing of the facility in 2016, the building has remained unused. DSNY has considered repurposing the building for another use, but the idea halted due to high capital cost and the small size of the building. Because this building has been sitting vacant with no present or future program city use, and it's at risk of falling into continued disrepair, DCAS on behalf of DSNY is seeking disposition approval of the property. This approval will provide the city with flexibility to sell it in the future. Thank you, and now we welcome any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you very much. So similar fashion as the previous question that I asked, can you speak to Community Board 12's wishes against this disposition? I know there was some discussion at their land use committee meeting and they put out a formal letter stating that they were in disapproval of the disposition.
Yeah, so they were not in support. And they wanted us to work with the council member to kind of find other potential benefits for the community. And that is what we're doing. We're meeting with the council member. We've been meeting with HPD and city planning to kind of see what else we can do.
Okay, that's great news, especially since that area is, I think, just outside the proposed rezoning boundary, which is subject to change. But I do think that that is a great idea to consult with the council member in our office on any potential uses for that building. And seeing as how we do not have anyone here to publicly testify in person or virtually, I'm going to thank you for your very brief but informative presentation, and I'm going to go ahead and close this item. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And so now we can move on to the third calendar item.
Certainly. Calendar item number 3, ULURP number 240075 ZMQ. The applicant is GWY Realty, Inc. Affected Community Board number 4. Applicant, you may begin.
Thank you. Richard Lobel of Sheldon Lobel PC. Good morning. Alexia Landisman in my office is sharing the screen. We are joined today by Kevin Wang, the applicant, as well as Chang Tan, the project architect. We also have representatives of GZA, the environmental consulting firm. We're here today for a very straightforward application, the 8001 Broadway Commercial Overlay. Next slide. So as with other applications we brought before the Queensborough president, this is for a zoning map amendment to rezoning the existing R7A district in Elmhurst within Community Board 4 from an R7A to an R7A C24. And that's it. This would primarily affect 2 lots, of which the applicant is the owner of 1 lot. And this would bring existing legally non-conforming commercial uses within the area into conformance. So just to note, of course, the underlying zoning district, the R7A, remains unchanged. The bulk of the site that can be built today versus after the proposed rezoning would be adopted would be exactly the same. The difference, of course, is not even in the uses that would be available before and after the rezoning, because there is existing non-conforming commercial, but merely that they would become conforming. And in the event that, for example, there was a redevelopment of the property years into the future, they would be able to come back, which is not necessarily the case without the commercial overlay. The next slide demonstrates the existing zoning map, which gives a taste as far as why this is an entirely appropriate rezoning. And we'll see that further on the maps to come, but you'll see commercial overlays abound on Broadway in this area. There are at least 10 blocks within 6 blocks of the site that all have commercial overlays. You can see to the east, there are 5 blocks to the north and south along Broadway. Clearly, Broadway here, a wide street as per zoning, is a commercial corridor, which can benefit from commercial overlay here. Next slide is the tax map, merely demonstrating the multi-development site, which I say in air quotes because, of course, no development is proposed currently, as well as the entirety of the rezoning area, as this would include the block frontage along Broadway here. You can see the commercial overlays as well to the east of the site. I think the next slide really well demonstrates, as far as the area map is concerned, why this is particularly appropriate. As Alexia forwards to that slide, there is, you can see from the red and pink colors on the map, the commercial use is already on Broadway. Again, the typology in terms of the buildings in this area around Broadway all reflect either this existing R7A or R7B or longstanding non-complying buildings that are 6, 7, or 8 stories. So this is really not about bulk, it's really about use. And Broadway here being a central commercial corridor, having access to multiple subway lines as well as bus transit makes it particularly appropriate for the commercial overlay here. The next slide is the zoning change map. Again, merely demonstrating that the frontage of Broadway between Pettit and Baxter Avenues would now have a commercial overlay, as can be seen on the map. And this would be a C24. The next slide, I think, starts the photos of this property, which I think really well demonstrate the roughly 9 commercial businesses which currently populate the site. The site has housed commercial businesses since 1947, so for close to 80 years. Frankly, the commercial uses here are really well utilized by the local area. There are restaurants here that are used by visitors and workers at Elmhurst Hospital, which is adjacent to the west. There is a daycare center established by the applicant dating back for 25 years. Really, it's one of these rezonings that would be considered to be a minor rezoning, which is really one which is done to correct the zoning map to accurately reflect what is actually on the site. We include plans merely to demonstrate the location of the commercial uses here. And, with that, I would just make 2 notes. The first is that the applicant has been a longstanding member of the community, having owned this site dating back to 2000. So, again, has been established here for over 20 years. And one thing that I like to consider when looking at rezonings is kind of the stance of the applicant in terms of the community. Here, the applicant is a member of the community. When left to his own devices with a commercial use on the property, basically established useful commercial stores, as well as a daycare facility, which he established here 25 years ago, housing many local children and school-aged children. This is an applicant who's really demonstrated care and concern. And finally, I would note that part of the applicant's site is the U.S. Post Office, which, if the commercial overlay is not established here, would be at risk of having to potentially in the future leave the site. This post office, again, is heavily utilized by the local area. The leases on the site for the commercial uses right now date through 2025 to 2020, no, even further, sorry, 2028. So the uses here are going to be here for a minimum of 5 years. There would be no redevelopment during that time in accordance with the leases. So what we have here, frankly, as far as the land use rationale is concerned, is a really rock solid potential rezoning. With that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Alexia. So to clarify for the record, were these buildings or uses established pre-1961, or did they have BSA variances?
Oh, they were established pre-61. They're all grandfathered or non-conforming.
Okay, just wanted to make sure I understood that. Otherwise, this sounds like a very straightforward application. I believe Community Board 4 has yet to meet or vote on this.
No, they did
item?
vote. They did vote. It
Was
was
that?
it was a denial.
It was a denial. Okay.
Yeah, and frankly, it was very distressing. I think that their view was that it was more appropriate to create housing here. And so they shouldn't be encouraging the applicant to maintain these commercial uses. When frankly, there's among everything else I've said, there's 60 to 70 jobs that are currently created through the commercial uses at the site. There's hundreds of visitors to this site in terms of utilizing these local businesses. And we had a couple of votes in favor, but in general, the community board was voted against it.
Understood. Okay, so we'll revisit that recommendation just to make sure we have that in our record, but otherwise I don't have any further questions, and no one is here to publicly testify in person or virtually, so I'm going to thank you and go ahead and close out this item.
Thank you for hearing us.
Thank you.
And so now we will move on to the 4th and final calendar number.
Calendar item number 4, ULURP number N240179ZRY. The applicant, New York City Department of City Planning, for consideration citywide. Please begin.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Johnson. I'm with the Department of City Planning, and the department is proposing a citywide zoning text amendment to allow gaming facilities as a permitted use in certain commercial manufacturing districts, that's C4, C5, C6, 7, and 8, M1, M2, and M3. And let me share my screen now. Okay. So gaming facilities are currently not a legally permitted use in the city. There's not mentioned once in the zoning resolution. So the purpose of this citywide text amendment is to add that use into the ZR for the first time. So what is a gaming facility? So a gaming facility, as defined by the state, New York State, means a premises approved under a state gaming license, which includes a gaming area and any other non-gaming structure related to the gaming use. It may include things like hotels, restaurants, parking, those types of amenities. We see that a lot of these facilities typically have a hotel associated with it, parking, etc. So a gaming facility could be all that broader uses, broader things affiliated with use, or it could just be the casino. It's not specific in our text that you have to have those other uses. So the text amendment would then facilitate the development and operation of up to 3 gaming facilities in the New York City, as approved and licensed through a recently state-defined process. And the proposed text would then deem gaming facility allowed under the ZR. So the text amendment is a result of a January 2023 announcement by the state to solicit proposals for up to 3 new commercial casinos. Now, this entire process was started back in 2013, as you can see on the slide here. And there was a statewide referendum, and New York State voters approved 7 new commercial casinos. Subsequent to that, 4 have been built and are in operation upstate, and there's 3 remaining licenses. So at the beginning of last year, in January of 2023, the state released a document. It's up on their website that you can go see. They have a lot of information up there if you want to read up on it, called Request for Applications to Develop and Operate a Gaming Facility in New York State. Now, this document outlines a process and how to be awarded one of these licenses, and it's only for New York City, Long Island, Putnam, Rockland, and Westchester County. So it's for the downstate region. And so while this text amendment is only focusing on New York City, it is also other areas are included in the ability to be awarded a license. So I'll go over a new siting and review process in a second, but first I just want to wrap up. There is one facility in New York City, Aqueduct and Resorts World in Queens, and that's permitted because it's on state-owned property, and New York City doesn't control that. New York State controls that, so that's why they're up there. We also had, some of you may remember, off-track betting. There are still off-track betting sites around the state, but the one in New York City went bankrupt in 2010. So what we have here is a map of what the New York State Gaming Commission controls. You can see a number of facilities around the state. They have something that they refer to as Indian gaming. They have 7 of those sites, but the ones that we're most interested in are the ones obviously in our region, which is downstate. So this orange one here and the purple one, that represents Aqueduct and Resorts World. Number 2 is the Belmont Racetrack in Elmont, Long Island. This pinkish red number 1 is a hotel and lottery site, video lottery, which are just machines. They also have a hotel. And then number 5 is the Yonkers Raceway, which I think is also just a lottery site. So these are the 4 commercial casinos that were just recently built: Geauga Downs, Del Lago, Resorts World, Catskills, and Rivers Casino. So those have people in them who are dealing cards, etc. So what we have in these sites downstate, the one in Queens, the one in Yonkers, and the one in Suffolk, those have no people. It's all automated. So that's one of the differences. So this would, if you're awarded one of these licenses, then you would be able to have what we all think of as a casino with people dealing cards, etc., baccarat. So moving on, so this is the process. So one of the things that might be confusing from my presentation is that we're only here to review the citywide text amendment to add the use in the ZR. But in order for everyone to understand why we're doing this, I have to go over the state process of what they're proposing. And obviously I don't work for the state, but it just helps with understanding the process. So what we have here is what the New York State Gaming Commission created. They created this group to oversee the process called the Gaming Facility Location Board, which is right here. And this process they've created, we'll be creating community advisory committees in each location where there is a site. And it's a 6-member committee. Who's the governor, the mayor, the local state senator, the local state assembly member, your BP, and your local city council member. So they will be holding public meetings and public hearings and getting input from each community. And they will review the applications in their community district, in their area. And then they will vote on whether to approve it or disapprove it by a 2/3 vote. Now, if they vote to approve, then that application goes to the Gaming Facilities Location Board. We'll then take all the applications. There are currently 9 in New York City, and we're aware of 2. There's one out in Long Island, and there's the Yonkers site. So we know of 2 outside of New York City that have applications. So they will take all applications for gaming facilities that are approved and review them in order to establish which 3 get the license. There's only 3, and there's no more. There's only 3. I just want to emphasize that. So if the local CACs, if your CAC is reviewing one in Flushing Meadows at Willits, and they don't approve it, then that project is dead. It doesn't move forward. So what they're reviewing, what they're doing to review these applications, Gaming Facilities Location Board, is these issues here: economic activity, revenue impact, local siting impact, workforce development, and diversity framework. And then they have a contact person if you have more questions that you want to ask the state. But I do recommend that you go to their website because they have a lot of information up there. So moving on to the text. So the purpose of the proposed text is to facilitate the state's current casino proposal as enacted by the state legislature and described in their request for applications for gaming facilities. So this is adding the use into use group A. It's not currently in there, like I mentioned. And it's putting it into one of these districts. So it's not in any residential districts. It's only in these particular community districts and manufacturing districts. And it's limited to the gaming licenses that are available now. This text is not for any future licenses. And it's only for these 3. So once these 3 are awarded, the text is no longer valid for any gaming facility. So so hypothetically, if there were future, there's been a lot of discussions in the public meetings about future gaming facilities outside of these 3, which there's only 3, but there would have to be an entire new statewide referendum. New York State voters would have to approve more, and then New York City would then have to decide whether they want to be in the game for more gaming facilities. And if we were, then we'd have to do an entire new text amendment. So I just want to emphasize it's only for these 3 licenses. So I think I mentioned this first one already. It doesn't apply to any future licenses. It only applies to these 3. But another thing I wanted to add is it doesn't apply to any future modifications for a facility. So hypothetically, if one is approved by a CAC, it's forwarded to the Gaming Facilities Location Board, and they award it one of the 3 licenses. Whatever was reviewed is the development and the bulk, and the use, and the envelope. If 10 years from now, the site is up and running and it's a wild success and they want to build a new tower, they want to add in more parking spaces, or they want to add more hotel rooms, they have to come back to the city and go through the Department of City Planning and ULURP. So this slide just shows the 9 sites, the locations of the 9 sites around New York City. There's the 5 in Midtown Manhattan, high density commercial district. This one at Ferry Point Park, that Bolly's took that lease over. So they're developing a hotel and casino out there. You probably are familiar with the proposal at Willits Point, Queens Future. This is Resorts World, the existing one, and then Brooklyn, Coney Island, with Thor Equities, they have a proposal. So these are the only 9 that we have. And you can see where they sit around the city. So the yellow is where those zoning districts are. Everything else is residential. So they're restricted to these commercial and manufacturing districts. Now, the only other item I wanted to mention here is that the reason why the city's doing this is because we can't meet the state's timeline for awarding licenses quickly and efficiently enough. So we have to do this text amendment, which then puts the public review in the hands of the community advisory committees and your local politicians, which will hold public hearings and have public comments. But in addition to that, there's 4 projects. That's Ferry Point, Willits, Coney Island, and Western Rail Yards number 1 here. Those are all going through a separate ULURP. So each of those have to go through ULURP for their project. So you may be aware that Queens Future had a public scoping hearing in December, and they're in the process of with us right now because they have to demap the parkland. So this similar for 6 and 7. For Ferry Point's also in parkland. So they have to alienate the parkland and go through the state, and then they have to map a zoning district because there is no zoning district there. And that requires a new zoning district and a map change at city planning. So that's why those 2 are here. In addition to that, they have some disposition actions required because they're changing some of the city streets, widening city streets, or narrowing or adding new ramps because facilities are large and they need to be able to take all the cars that come in to their site. So here's just another map that you can see the different M districts and zoning commercial districts a little clearer. So that pretty much wraps up my presentation. We are having a public hearing at city planning on the project next week. We take all community board resolutions past the public hearing date at city planning up until the vote, the city planning vote. So I want everyone to understand that we'll take whatever the community board send us, the borough president and the borough board sends us, we'll take whatever they want to send, and we'll make sure the city planning commissioners review those and see those. So that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much. And I realize that this can be a bit of a complicated application based on the state and the city, both at play here. So I'm just gonna ask some clarifying questions for the record.
Sure.
So you made a very interesting point that this current text amendment would only affect the current 3 licenses in play. So if there were other licenses in the future, there would have to be another text amendment. So what would, I mean, if in your best guess, like what would that next text amendment look like?
Well, there's a couple different options for that. So everybody would have to be in agreement that that's what we'd want to pursue. So just because I'm explaining a process doesn't mean it's happening, because there are no future licenses. All right. So I don't want people to think that we're planning something here, because we're not. So if that happened in the future and the state permitted more time for these things to happen and New York City was interested, then you could potentially go through, and there were only a couple applications, you could potentially go through a regular ULIP process. But if it's anything like this one, where we have a large number of applications and has a particular time frame that we can't get through them all, then it would follow the same process here, is that we would then, you could take the text that we have and create a new text saying that it's only related to however many commercial licenses are now available in the future.
Okay, understood. So in this case, though, with these 3 available licenses, if this text amendment does pass, that means that those 3 licenses would then be allowed as of right in the commercial or manufacturing zones in the city. Am I saying that correctly?
It's deemed permissible in the zoning resolution. So the concept here is that the CACs would be reviewing, and city planning, as the technical experts on land use and zoning, would be participating in that review process. We don't have a vote on a CAC, but the mayor does. And we work with city council members and the BPs daily on projects. So we're the technical experts and we would be reviewing applications. But we do not have a vote. I want to make that clear. City planning does not have a vote, but we would assist everybody in reviewing those applications.
Okay, understood. And then a quick question regarding environmental review. So I do understand that there are 4 sites that are going through their own ULURP process based on other actions that need to be resolved if they were to be approved. So any gaming facilities that would receive CAC approval in a commercial or manufacturing zone, would they then go through their own environmental review during that process or after approval from the CAC?
Sure. So the baseline is the state environmental quality review process is the lead on these site-specific applications. So the state would be leading the environmental review. But in addition to that, using the Queen's example again, because they already held scoping, the mayor's office of environmental coordination and EDC are working on that application because they were a bit ahead of the game in getting their environmental material together. And there has to be an environmental review for their specific ULURP at city planning, right? So there is environmental review for these 4 ULURPs. And then whatever is being done for those 4 ULURPs would then be part of the state environmental review of the gaming facility application. But if there is no ULURP for the other projects, then the state is completely doing the environmental review for those.
Okay. And so with the environmental review process and with the CAC process, if you could speak to what avenues, if any, are available for the public to take to voice their opinions, since it seems like with this text amendment, if it were to be approved, there wouldn't be a need to go before each community board throughout the city. It seems like it would be localized to each community advisory committee. So I just wanted to ask more about the general public's ability to speak and testify on these matters.
Sure. So the first step for the local community review is this text amendment. So the text amendment, we're getting feedback on different aspects of the application, which has been kind of interesting for me because a lot of the discussion that I'm hearing at the different community boards, they don't necessarily put into their community board resolution, but we've heard that and we're noting that. So that's the first step. The second step is that if the citywide text amendment is approved, then the CACs become the public hearing process for each application, because those are required for each application. So they've said in their documentation that they're holding a public hearing, they're holding public meetings, and they're having public response. And I think from our perspective, because I've worked a lot with a variety of community boards, they let their local council member and borough president know what their feelings are on certain projects. So I think that's how we're viewing the public review process. And I think, you know, there's been a lot of feedback from certain community boards, which say that this takes ULURP out of the process for CACs. But what we're saying with this application is not only are for the projects already going through ULURP, but the CACs, the Community Advisory Committees, is the public review process for these applications, where everybody can speak and review the use, the envelope, the bulk, the use. They'll be looking at, I feel like we anticipate that each community board is going to be reviewing these applications with existing zoning in mind, right? So my example is if you're proposing a 500-foot tower in the middle of a park, the community was going to say this is not permitted. Our building height in this area has been, 50 feet or 100 feet. And then they'll review that against that and say, well, is this what we want here? Or, in a closer situation, if they're proposing, if there's say a 150-foot height limit and a developer is proposing 165 feet, that's really close. They might think, well, that's permissible because we're purportedly getting all these economic benefits, job creation, et cetera, from this development. So that's how we kind of see the process moving forward. And like I said, we'll be participating as a city agency along with EDC, and Parks Department is all over the two projects that are in parks. And actually, they're also participating in the Coney Island one too, because it's right on the waterfront, and Parks Department controls that.
Excuse me. Thank you. And I know this is really the city's response to a state law that was passed in 2013, and there are now licenses up for review. So I appreciate your candor and going through these questions that can be a bit complicated. And I'm just gonna quickly ask Omar if there are any attendees that are on the Zoom that might have signed up to publicly testify or receive. Okay, so no attendees are signed up to publicly testify on Zoom, and there are no public members in the room with me, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this item and thank the applicant for their presentation.
Thank you. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, our next scheduled hybrid land use public hearing is Thursday, February 29th. It is a leap year this year, starting at 9:30 a.m. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you very much.